Anyone can pick up a sniper rifle, but mastering it takes more than aim. From bullet drop and zeroing to positioning and stealth, this is how you actually get better at sniping in Battlefield 6. Here are the tips I wish I knew sooner to get better at using the sniper rifle in the Recon class. The first one's a little obvious, but you're going to want to use the Recon class whenever possible. Whenever you use a sniper rifle with this class, your scope sway will be decreased, you'll be able to hold your breath longer, and you'll be able to rechamber rounds faster. It also has aim spotting as its signature trait. This automatically spots enemies when you're scoped in and aiming at them, which is super helpful as a Recon class for spotting enemies for your teammates. It also has a few signature gadgets which are great. The first is the motion sensor, which lets you track enemy movement within a limited range. It's great for setting up on objectives to see where enemies are coming from, or using it to watch your back so you don't get flanked. The other gadget is the remote drone. We'll go into more details later, but this thing is awesome for spotting enemies for your teammates, as well as racking up a ton of points for yourself. Next, we're going to want to make sure we're aiming for headshots. This is because this is the only consistent way to get one-shot kills on enemies, since body shots are typically two-shot kills unless you're inside the sweet spot. Speaking of the sweet spot, each sniper rifle has a distance where it becomes a one-shot kill to the upper body. This is usually between 80 to 120 meters, depending on the rifle. This is where upper body shots will be a one-shot kill. I'd recommend having a rough idea of this distance for each rifle when you're using it. Inside of this distance, you'll get a lot more one-shot kills, since if you miss when you're aiming for the head, you might still hit them when you get them in the upper body. The sweet spot also applies when you're facing enemy snipers though. They can also one-shot kill you if you're inside their sweet spot. There is actually a visual warning when you're inside of someone else's sweet spot. The typical white glint will actually become a bit of a rainbow glint, which is an indicator that you're inside of their sweet spot, and any shots to your upper body or your head will be a one-shot kill. If that's the case, you're going to want to take cover or quickly take them out, since you're much more likely to get taken out yourself inside of this distance. Bullet drop is the thing in Battlefield, and you'll notice this more with long-range weapons where the bullet drop becomes more pronounced over distance. The drop isn't the same for every weapon though. It's actually affected by the bullet velocity stat, which is unique to each weapon. And certain barrels will actually increase this stat, making the bullet drop less pronounced. Where possible, you're going to want to run barrels and attachments that increase your velocity so this bullet drop becomes less noticeable. Fortunately, you can zero your scope to help account for this. You can adjust your scope within 100 meter increments to account for the bullet drop. Pressing down on the D-pad or B on PC will adjust your zeroing distance from 100 meters, 200, 300, 400, and 500. This helps drastically reduce the amount of bullet drop. You will have to develop a feel for the distance though, so that you make sure you adjust properly. If in doubt, it's usually better to adjust to a lower distance. This is because if you're not zeroed in far enough, worst case, if you're aiming for the head, you might end up with a body shot. But if you zero in too far away, you actually run the risk of overcompensating and shooting over their head. If you'd rather skip the trial and error though, equip a Rangefinder. It automatically zeroes your reticle to the exact distance of your target, removing all the guesswork with bullet drop and ensuring your shots land exactly where you aim. To use the Rangefinder, you just hold down the same button you use to cycle through your distances, so B on PC or down on the D-pad. This will zero into the exact distance, which removes the bullet drop completely. You definitely want to run this if you have it unlocked, or prioritize getting it if you don't. You want to make sure you're using the right zoom level for the map you're playing on. 6 to 8 times scopes are great for wide open maps, while 4 times scopes are ideal for tighter, more urban fights. It's also smart to stick to one magnification level, especially before unlocking the Rangefinder, since you'll naturally start learning distance and bullet drop by how enemies appear at that zoom level. If you want, you can use the firing range to test bullet drop, zeroing, and scope preference before heading into matches. Spend a few minutes learning how each rifle behaves at different ranges. This includes things like bullet drop and the sweet spot for when upper body shots are a one-shot kill. This will then help pay off in real matches when you can instantly compensate for distance or know when you're inside of the sweet spot. Spotting is one of the most important things you can do as a recon. Like I mentioned earlier, you actually automatically tag enemies just by aiming at them, but you can manually spot enemies for your whole team by pressing Q on PC or L1 or LB on console while aiming. These marks stay visible on the minimap and over enemies' heads, which helps make your team more aware of where enemies are and easier for them to take them out. When you tag an enemy, pay attention to the marker's look. A solid marker means the enemy is fully spotted for your team. But if you only see a hollow marker, that means only you can see them. If you see a hollow marker over them, make sure you actually ping them so that everyone can see that enemy. Like I mentioned earlier, the Recon Drone is one of the strongest gadgets in this class. You can fly this thing up, automatically spot enemies, highlight targets with thermal vision, and safely scout objectives or enemies that are flanking. It's extremely helpful for your team. You can basically spot the entire enemy team, which is super helpful for your team to push through choke points or to watch for enemies flanking if you're on defense. You also get a ton of points for spotting enemies and assists if your team actually takes them out. When you're flying the drone, you want to be aware of its limited battery life and out of bounds range. If you fly too far into the enemy's territory, the timer is very short, so you want to avoid flying into these out of bounds areas completely. Keep an eye on your map and make sure you're staying within the combat area. You also want to fly high enough and constantly strafe so you're a harder target to hit, but also stay low enough so that you can still clearly spot enemies and mark vehicles for your team. Motion sensors are your ground level surveillance. Drop them often near objectives, flanks, or capture points. They automatically ping nearby moving enemies. Just keep in mind that crouched or prone players won't trigger them, so while they're not perfect, they're still one of the best ways to detect approaching threats. Just like the drone, if you put these near an objective, you'll rack up a ton of spotting points. Enemy footsteps in Battlefield 6 are surprisingly loud. You'll want to have a good headset and listen for directional audio cues. It can help easily warn you if someone's sneaking up on you before they appear on your radar. This becomes especially important when you're scoped in and not completely aware of your surroundings. Try to avoid fighting up close as much as possible. Sniper rifles are obviously not meant for close quarters, and most secondaries in Battlefield 6 can't compete with primaries in a straight one-on-one. If someone gets too close, focus on repositioning, using cover, or switch to your pistol only if you've caught them by surprise. Your stance directly affects your shot stability. Being crouched or prone drastically reduces scope sway and recoil drift. This lets you have better aim and not have to rely on holding your breath quite as much. Just like the rangefinder, a suppressor is a great attachment to consider putting on your rifle. This is helpful if you're flanking enemies and firing from the side, so you stay off the radar and they don't actually know where you're shooting them from. After a few kills, and especially if you're counter-sniping, move to a new position. Enemy snipers you've picked off will often spawn back in and look for you from a new angle. Changing locations regularly makes you far harder to predict and keeps you alive a lot longer. This can also trick enemy snipers who will be looking for you from the last position they knew you were coming from. Just remember, whenever you're scoped in, your position is exposed by your rifle's scope glint. Other snipers can see it instantly, and even players with longer range weapons like DMRs or assault rifles can spot you if you're not too far away. It's impossible to eliminate the glint completely, so just be mindful of it. But some rifles, like the M2010, have an attachment you can unlock which will help reduce scope glint. Try to avoid shooting from exposed positions. Always have solid cover that protects your body while letting you peek through just enough to line up your shot. Ideally, try to control a lane or corridor. That way you're only exposed to threats from the front and can quickly duck back if you take return fire. Flanking gives you a better line of sight on clustered enemies and reduces your risk of counter snipers directly opposing you. If you're running a suppressor, this becomes even more effective. You can pick off multiple enemies before anyone realizes where you're firing from. Watch for other scope glints in the distance. That's the best warning that another sniper has their eyes on your area. If you spot one, take them out, relocate immediately, or wait for them to fire and then return the favor before they could re-aim. The high ground can be powerful as a sniper, but open hilltops make you an easy target for DMRs, tanks, aircrafts, and of course other snipers. Always choose positions with cover, and don't linger in clear sightlines longer than you need to. Pulling out your knife gives you the fastest sprint speed in the game. Since your sniper isn't really ideal for running gunfights anyways, it's best to move with a knife drawn and only re-equip your rifle when you're ready to fire. Even if you miss, continuous sniper fire can keep enemies pinned behind cover and buy your team time to reposition or push forward. Players tend to take cover when they hear or see a sniper shot nearby. A missed shot that forces movement can be just as useful as a kill. Every map has a few dominant sniper lanes and counter-sniping positions. Learn where players typically set up and use that knowledge both defensively and offensively. If you can predict where opposing recon players will be watching you from, you can pre-aim or flank them before they even see you coming. Recon isn't just about sitting at the edge of the map. You're most effective when you're covering teammates as they push the objective. Holding lanes near objectives lets you pick off enemies trying to contest it, while also giving your team safe movement routes. Playing closer to the fight leads to more opportunities for kills and spotting assists. It also helps your squad since they can spawn on you instead of having to spawn back at HQ and run all the way to the objective again. There are also a few settings you're going to want to adjust for the best experience. I recommend setting your minimap range to around 250 on foot and 300 for vehicles. This gives you far better awareness of nearby enemies and spotted enemies without constantly opening the full map. You're definitely going to want to disable camera shake. Explosion and movement effects can make your aim feel inconsistent. Turn camera shake off completely to keep your crosshairs steady when scoped or near heavy combat. Also, turn off motion blur. These post-processing effects look cinematic, but make long-range targets harder to see. Disable them to sharpen your visuals and keep your sight picture clean. Also consider adjusting your field of view. This makes rifles appear smaller on screen, freeing up more peripheral vision. It's a small tweak that gives you a big advantage when spotting targets. So what do you think of these tips? And is there anything else you think is important? Let me know in the comments below. Also feel free to like and subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching.